I want to spend a couple more minutes talking about this morning's parsha, and then we'll go our own way and enjoy the beautiful afternoon. But like I said, especially this section of Kedoshim and the section that Sharon read, it's certainly worth spending a couple more minutes on. As I alluded to earlier, both the section in chapter 18, which is that section of illicit relationships, and this section that we read from chapter 19 vie for the same liturgical slot. The reading from chapter 18 is actually the traditional reading for Yom Kippur afternoon. It's not entirely clear why this is. Again, it's not the most inspirational selection from the Torah. It does, kind of in the stream of the text follow pretty closely from this morning's, from the Yom Kippur morning reading. But the most kind of commonly accepted reasoning that I've heard is that Yom Kippur was a day of great gathering. And so everyone was kind of, and especially by the afternoon, everyone was there. There's not much else to do. It's not like you're home, eating or preparing food. And so everyone is out and about and gathered together. And so traditionally, I guess in the olden days, Yom Kippur afternoon was a time for matchmaking, and a time when the youth, I guess, would kind of sneak off on their own, and do their own matchmaking. And the understanding is that this reminder of this list of illicit relationships was kind of a very tangible and practical piece of Torah to be teaching in that atmosphere, right? Remember, especially in tight-knit, isolated communities, kind of a reminder to everyone of who the Torah says is off limits. And for many reasons, the progressive Jewish world was ready to move on from this passage on Yom Kippur. And certainly, most egregiously, we have this really harsh language condemning homosexual sex. And by extension, for far too long in religious communities of all types who honor, the scripture of the Old Testament, it was also built out for a condemnation of homosexuals themselves, and their lifestyle. And it, for a very long time, pushed that entire community into the margins of Jewish life, if not entirely into the closet. And of all the difficult passages in the Torah, I think that specific verse of condemning the act of homosexuality as an abomination is one of the hardest to get our heads around, or even to kind of justify why it's there in the first place. With so many other of the difficult passages, things in Genesis, like the moral failings of individuals, or even, when we get to the people failing throughout the desert, or even moments when we perceive God to be perhaps acting out of line, there's not all that much that transcends time and explanation and our common human experience in the same way that this verse does. And I do just want to, I don't have a ton more to say about it, and I certainly don't have a justification or an answer to that difficulty, other than to raise it up and to raise the tremendous amount of tension and pain it has caused. But thankfully, we don't have to travel very far in the text to find something that is a much better fit for our Yom Kippur practice and mindset. The section in Leviticus 19 that charges us not only to hold ourselves to higher standards, but also how to lift up others around us along the way. This section is an essential piece of what's known as the Holiness Code, and it serves as a foundational pillar of that code. I wonder often what we think of when we hear the word holiness. And certainly, for what the rest of the book of Leviticus is, with all its talk of sacrifices and priestly garments and purity and impurity, holiness can often seem like something that is completely out of this world, something that is not accessible to each and every one of us. But here in the opening verse of Parshat Kedoshim, Kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. You shall be holy, for I, Adonai, your God, am holy. And what does that holiness consist of? Honoring our parents, caring for the poor, treating friends and workers and the disadvantaged with dignity and respect. And ultimately, to close this circle, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, ani Adonai. Love your fellow as yourself, I am Adonai. Created as we are in the image of God, we recognize in each other the holiness, the love, the right actions of this passage are all one and the same. A little further on in this morning's Parsha, as we alluded to, chapter 19, verse 34, we are commanded in an expansion of these concepts of justice and brotherhood to love the stranger as yourself, for you were once strangers in the land of Egypt. On this verse, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs has a beautiful commentary. You know the heart of the stranger because you were once a stranger in the land of Egypt. If you are human, so are they. If they are less than human, so are you. You must fight the hatred in your heart as I once fought the greatest ruler and the strongest empire in the ancient world on your behalf. I made you into the world's archetypical strangers so that you would fight for the rights of strangers, for your own and those of others, wherever they are, whoever they are, whatever the color of their skin or the nature of their culture, because though they are not in your image, says God, they are nonetheless in mine. There is only one reply strong enough to answer the question, why should I not hate the stranger? Because the stranger is me. On our Earth Day Minyan on Thursday morning, I introduced to the group that gathered a practice of Rabbi Art Green's, reciting the daily Ma'amad, the verses of each corresponding day of creation from Sunday through Friday, as a reminder and a call to action of the beauty and glory of the creation of the world and our own place in it and our responsibility to protect it and guard over it. We're lucky enough to read these passages in chapter 19 at least twice a year. And even at that, it's not nearly enough. I encourage you to flip through this text one more time, whenever you have a couple moments, to bring it into your life, and to remember what the core of Jewish ideological practice can be as we continue to strive for tikkun olam. Find a verse or multiple verses that speak to you, and maybe, we have one hung up on a sign outside our building. Maybe pick one or two and try to hang it up as a little bit of a sign inside your heart, something to carry with you to really remember, what is the positive effect we want to have on the world, and how do we, as Jews, want to relate as ones who have been strangers, and how we relate to those who are perceived as strangers.